Tonight's message, all right, we're going to do, and I forgot to post the video on our Instagram, but we're going to watch a TikTok where this lady attempts to argue that abortion, on the grounds of what the Bible says, is actually not a sin. And she gives several passages that she thinks supports abortion. And so we're going to listen to her, give her perspective, and then we're going to respond. We're going to go deep into what the Bible, we're going to go over those passages that she brought up, and then we're going to bring up even more Bible passages, and we're going to see, is abortion a sin? Is it as easy as some people make it out to be? Okay? So let's go ahead and watch her.
Yeah, you're not going to like what I have to say. Genesis 2:7 is the creation of mankind. Man is but a formed thing until God breathes air through his nostrils, creating a living soul. Genesis 2:7 says life begins at first breath. Exodus is about crime and punishment. If somebody destroys property, they have to pay a fine. If somebody commits murder, they pay with their life. Exodus 21 says if somebody causes a woman to expel a not fully formed fetus from her body, that's abortion or a forced miscarriage. He has to pay a fine as if he had destroyed property. He does not pay with his life. Exodus 21 says a fetus is not a living thing. Numbers 5:11 through 31 is all about the tale of the bitter water. A man thinks his wife is a harlot and he thinks she is pregnant by another man. He seeks help from religious leaders. They give him a concoction that he makes her drink, causes her to expel the fetus from her body. That is a forced abortion. Numbers 5:11 through 31 says abortion is okay. Did you like what I had to say?
Okay, so she was very confident. She was very confident. And maybe. Okay, but here's the deal. She seemed very confident. The Bible absolutely supports abortion, and if you think otherwise, you're clearly mistaken, because look at these verses I just quoted. So we're going to talk through these verses one at a time. We're going to read the verses, and then we're going to talk about and put it in its context. Here's this word context. I use this word a lot when I talk about the Bible. And what I mean by this is when you take an individual verse in the Bible and you try to say, here's what it means. If you don't look at the surrounding passages, you may miss what the author intended. I want you guys to imagine for a sec. I'm giving you an example of why context is important when you read the Bible. I want you to imagine that I'm teaching you guys a lesson one night, and my lesson is about how racism is wrong. And I want you to imagine that I give you guys an example of racism. I'd say, okay, if somebody was to say that all Mexicans are wetbacks, that would be a racist statement. And I talk about how that's racist, and you shouldn't say that, right? How that's unfair. Or you know what? If somebody says all white people are just demons from hell and they're just crackers, right? That's a racist statement, right? So I can go on and give examples. Now, in that message, I talk about how those statements are wrong. Now, I want you to imagine somebody in the youth group decided to record it, and they cut out the part where I said those statements are wrong. So all that you hear from the video is me saying a statement that sounds racist. Then they go and post that tiny little clip and says, look, this youth pastor says racist things. That's called taking somebody out of context. I was condemning those statements, but because they didn't understand, or they left out the part where I explained that I'm condemning it, now I look bad. Y'all see why context is important. The same applies to the Bible when you're reading it. And what a lot of people like to do, and this is people, Christians from any perspective, they like to read one verse and say, here's what it means, without looking at the rest of it to understand, what is this verse talking about? It's very, very important that you always understand the context. So now that I've established that, let's look at these passages one by one and see, is abortion okay based on these verses? The first passage she talks about is Genesis 2:7. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up, and we're going to read it together, all right? It says, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." So her claim is that this verse is saying that life only begins the moment you take your first breath. That's what she is saying this verse says. Now let's read it again. "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." Now the context here, for those who may have read this before, who is the man? Adam. It's talking about one person, Adam. Was Adam, being the first man, was he born? No. Did he have a mother? No. Was he ever inside of a womb? No. So when God formed Adam, right, Adam obviously only could live when got the exact moment God decided he would live, and not any moment sooner. Okay, so let's talk about this passage then. So a few things. This passage only refers to Adam's life. This verse is not saying that every person's life only begins when they are born and take their first breath in the outside world. That's not what this verse says. It's talking about Adam and Adam only, how his life began when God breathed into him. So that's very important. Second, Adam was never born, so God had to bring him to life, like we just talked about. So God is forming Adam's body. He's shaping it the way that he would like. He's deciding how, man and humanity, how our bodies are going to function, and then God breathes into him, gives him life for the first time, right? And another thing is that a lot of times when pro-choice people will talk about this passage, they'll refer to it as that there's a verse in the Bible that says that life begins at first breath. There is no Bible passage that says life begins at first breath. That quote, that phrasing is not anywhere in the Bible. Where they're getting this term from, life begins at first breath, is the passage we just read. Does it say life begins at first breath? No, it says that God breathed into Adam's nostrils the breath of life. It does not say that human life, all human life for all humans everywhere, only begins when they breathe when they're outside the womb. That's not what that says. You would have to assume that's what God means without actually reading the passage. And then as we know, how was Eve made? For those who are like Bible experts, you've read all of it. How was Eve made? Y'all remember? Okay, right? So Adam was made out of the dust of the ground, right? God is forming him with his own hands. And then Eve is made by God, putting Adam to sleep, literally takes a rib, copies and pastes it, right? Pretend it's a computer for a second. Takes that rib, and then from the rib begins to form Eve, all right? Because God is just that powerful. And so obviously God would have breathed into her the breath of life. Again, Eve was not born. If you're not born, God has to have a deciding point when you start to live. And this is how God decided for them to start living. Okay, this does not apply to all humans everywhere when they start living, obviously. If you're saying that this verse is saying this is how everybody starts living, that means every individual person ever in existence has to be made, every man has to be made from the ground, and every woman has to be made from some other dude's rib. Obviously, that is not how humanity works. This was unique to Adam and Eve. This is not how God intended all humanity to work. So this verse is not saying what she's saying it is, right? This verse is not applying to all people. This is only talking about Adam and Eve. So far, we're one verse in. She's already taken the Bible out of context. She's saying it says things that it doesn't actually say, and she's looking at it as, how can I twist this to make it fit with my views rather than trying to understand what the Bible is literally and plainly saying on its own. Now, the next passage she uses is Exodus 21, 22 through 25. I'm going to read this. And this passage, to give you the context, is talking about if a pregnant woman is hit accidentally in an altercation, right, what would the consequences be? Okay, so I'm going to read these verses here, and then we'll talk about it. It says, if men strive, that means to fight, if men strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, meaning her child is born, it says, and yet no mischief follow, meaning nobody dies, he shall surely be punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him. And he shall pay as the judges determine. And it says, and if any mischief or death follow, then thou shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, and stripe for stripe. There is this concept in the Old Testament when God is setting up the legal system for Israel. It's called life for life. God views human life as sacred and worthy of protection. So much so that if you unjustly take somebody's life, you will have to have your life taken. That was considered justice. An eye for an eye, a life for a life. You are not allowed to take life without a just cause. It's one of the 10 Commandments, right? Thou shalt not murder. God takes it very seriously. Do y'all know why God takes it so seriously, taking life that's not our own without a good cause? Because He created us. We're made in His image, right? God values all life. Okay, so now this passage, if we read it as it is saying, look, if you accidentally or not, if you hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but neither the woman or the child dies, then you're going to pay a fine, right? You're still going to get in trouble. But if either the woman or the child dies as a result of you hitting, then you're going to pay life for life. Now, what she said in the video was that this passage was saying, if you hit a woman and she miscarries, then you don't have to pay life for life. Is that what this says? No. Now, let me be fair, because there is a Bible translation that does use the word miscarriage. I want to read this, and we're going to figure out what's going on here, all right? So for those of y'all who don't know, there's multiple different Bible translations, right? This is the King James Version. It's what our church primarily uses. I also quote from this Bible here. It's the ESV, English Standard Version. I like both of them. I think the King James is the oldest English, one of the oldest English translations we have. It's one of the most accurate, because if y'all don't know, the Bible was not written in English. It was written in Hebrew and Greek. I think the King James is one of the most accurate and scholarly translations. However, let's go and look at this passage in the NIV, the New International Version. This will be what she was quoting from. So we're going to go to Exodus chapter 21, verses 22 through 25 in the NIV. Where did it go? So many Bible translations, man. All right, that's a whole other subject in and of itself. Okay, so here's what it says. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, wait, hold on, no. Sorry, that's the wrong one. That one says prematurely as well. Where's the one that gets it all messed up? Here we go. No, we're going to sing together. This is the waiting point because Tyler didn't save it. Dun, 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 dun. It's VeggieTales song. Who watched VeggieTales? If you like to talk to tomatoes, if the clouds can make you smile.
Did you like it?
Oh, it's the AMPC.
I thought he said Dory.
I found it.
Okay.
Let me read it.
Oh, I think I just pulled it up. Okay, here we go. All right, here we go. Sorry. I forgot to say, it's not the NIV. It's the Amplified. AMPC is how it's abbreviated Bible. Okay, it says, if men contend with each other and a pregnant woman is hurt so that she has a miscarriage, yet no further damage follows, the one who hurt her shall surely be punished with a fine to the woman's husband. But if any damage follows, you shall give life for life. So if we read this version of the Bible, it seems like, okay, if you hit a pregnant woman and she miscarries, meaning the baby dies, then there's not a punishment of life for life. Now, if we take this version of the Bible, it sounds like it's saying that a miscarriage, the killing of an unborn child, does not count as murder. Now, here's the problem. When you're looking at different Bible translations, one of the things to keep in mind is not all Bible translations are equal. Meaning not all translators actually do a good job of studying the Hebrew and the Greek, the original languages the Bible is written in. So when you look at the overall, I'm talking 95% plus of Bible translations and Bible scholars, they all will say this passage is not talking about miscarriage. It's talking about premature birth. Okay? So the premature birth, those of you who don't know, it's if there's a medical condition or an urgency, the baby is born earlier than they should have been. But under a premature birth, the baby is not killed. Okay? It means the baby is just born early. Okay, I don't know if y'all know this, but if a woman experiences trauma or physical force to her belly or abdomen or where the baby's being carried, it can cause the baby to be born early. That is a thing. So this passage is not saying if you like karate kick a woman and kill her child that's going to be a slap on the wrist. You just have to pay a fine. No. It's not talking about miscarriage. The original Hebrew, that word that they use there does not mean miscarriage. That is a mistranslation from that version of the Bible, which, by the way, I don't know anybody personally, pastors, theologians, that use this version of the Bible. It's not a very scholarly version of the Bible. Okay, and there's a reason why it's not used, because of stuff like this. Okay, almost every other translation talks about premature birth, meaning you cause the baby to come out sooner than expected. But as long as the baby or the mother does not die, then you will not be required to have the death penalty put on you. But if the baby is killed or the mother is killed, then you are going to have the death penalty. So this passage, okay, says the opposite of what she thinks it means. She thinks this passage is defending the idea that an unborn child is not really a human life, or else there would have been the death penalty required. But when you look at every other translation of the Bible, it is saying if you kill the child, you will have to pay with the death penalty. Okay? All right. Now, so this passage has the exact opposite meaning that she thought it did, because she used one Bible translation that is completely different than all others. And she thinks she really had a point there. So that, again, it's very important. Now, I know that on the subject of Bible translations, right, there's a lot of them out there, right? If you go to the Bible app and you just start scrolling through all the different translations, there's a whole lot, okay? Now, that being said, you think, Tyler, why are there so many Bible translations? That's a whole other subject in and of itself, but I can tell you this, the King James is one of the oldest English translations, and I think a good companion or partner to that is the ESV. It's got more modern English. King James is a little bit older, right? The thee, thou, the super formal stuff. So that can be hard to understand. I think the ESV is a good sidekick to the King James. So if you ever want to read the King James and then go and look at it in the ESV, maybe you'll get a better idea. But my preference is King James. That's my main thing, and I think that's what, if you're asking me which one I think you should stick with, I think you should stick with that one. It's one of the oldest and most reliable and most accurate translations that we still have today, even though it's a little outdated in terms of like the these, the thous, and stuff like that, all right? Overall, still better than most other translations. Okay, let's go to this last passage she talked about, and this one is in Numbers chapter 5, verses 27 through 28. And this is, she talked about how if a man suspects his wife of cheating, that he's going to bring her to these religious leaders, and they're going to give her a concoction, this potion, and it's going to cause her unborn child to be miscarried. Let's read this passage and see if that is what it says. It says, And when he, meaning the husband, hath made her to drink the water, then it shall come to pass that if she be defiled, meaning if she was guilty of cheating, and have done trespass against her husband, that the water that causeth the curse shall enter into her and become bitter. And her belly shall swell, and her thigh shall rot, and the woman shall be a curse among her people. And if the woman be not defiled, meaning if she was innocent, she didn't cheat, but be clean, then she shall be free and shall conceive seed, which means children. Okay, I'm going to read this same passage in the ESV and to get another reference, and then we'll see if it sounds any different or if it sounds basically the same. Okay, same thing, but in the ESV, and it says, I'll make sure I get the right verse 27. I'll start there. It says, And when he has made her drink the water, then if she has defiled herself and has broken faith with her husband, the water that brings the curse shall enter into her and cause bitter pain, and her womb shall swell, and her thighs shall fall away, and the woman shall be a curse among her people. But if the woman is not defiled herself and is clean, then she shall be free and shall conceive children. So this passage is kind of a weird thing, all right? In today's world, if you were to suspect that your wife or husband is cheating on you, we don't really think like, I'm going to go to the local pastor and he's going to stir me up a special potion and she's going to drink it, and if she's guilty, then whatever else. So for our time, we're like, well, that's kind of weird. Like, that's not something I would do. Okay, but putting that aside, There is instructions here. But here's the catch. The way she talked about this passage was assuming that this concoction, this potion, causes miscarriage. Now here's the one where the NIV goes wrong. All right, so I'll read the same passage in the NIV again. This is why it's important to study the Bible completely and totally. All right, so this time, for real, I know it's the NIV. Can't trick me this time. I got it wrong last time. All right, verses. Yo. Give me a second. Hold on. I'm sorry. I have an Android. Don't be mad at me, please. Don't be mad at me. Yeah. Okay. And it says, and when he has made her drink the water, then if she is defiled and has committed a trespass against her husband, the cursed water which she drank shall be bitterness and cause her body to swell and her thigh to fall away. Whoa. That's not the NIV. I need to be saving this stuff up front, don't I? Okay, it says, now, if she has made herself impure and been unfaithful to her husband, this will be the result. When she is made to drink the water that brings a curse and causes bitter suffering, it will enter her, her abdomen will swell, and her womb will miscarry, and she will become a curse. So again, this is one of the only Bible translations that uses the word miscarriage when every other Bible translation is not talking about that. So the other ones, it talks about her thigh or her womb, her belly will swell and her thigh will rot, meaning her uterus will literally shrink and become unable to be pregnant. So what it's talking about here, when we look at this, the curse that the woman would become barren, meaning she would not be able to get pregnant, not miscarry. The curse of this potion, if the woman was guilty of adultery, was that she would not be able to have children. Not that the child she already had would die, but that rather she would not be able to get pregnant anymore. That was the curse of the potion. That was the curse of this water. That was the point of the test. But notice something. Let's think about this logically. If this concoction that the priest made would automatically cause an abortion, then that would mean it doesn't matter if she's guilty or not. If she was pregnant, then every time that priest gave out that concoction, that baby would die, whether she was guilty or not. Think about that. If I had a potion and I said, okay, if you drink this, it will kill your baby automatically. And I gave it to a pregnant woman, every single time her baby's going to die. That potion, that water, does not know if you were guilty or not. Okay? It doesn't care. It's just a water. So if the whole idea was that this concoction was caused miscarriage, then how come it doesn't affect the woman that's innocent? Think about that. How come it only affects a woman who's guilty? How could that happen unless it wasn't the water itself that was causing the event? It was God. This water is just simply a test. It is a physical test, but who makes the ultimate call on whether or not somebody is guilty or innocent? That would be God. So now let's think about this logic. Let's put this all together. Let's assume the one version of the Bible that caused this a miscarriage, let's say it's accurate. Let's say that if a woman truly has committed adultery, and now she is pregnant, and if she was to go through this test and be found guilty, that her baby is miscarried. Let me ask this question. Who made the decision to take the child's life? God did. Not the woman. Because again, if she was innocent, would it kill the child? No. So obviously it was not the potion itself that would cause the death. Otherwise it would cause it every single time, whether she was innocent or guilty. No, there is a supernatural element to this test. This is not the woman deciding, hey, I don't want to have my kid, so I'm going to make this thing and drink it, and it's going to kill my baby. That's not what's happening here. God is determining a punishment based upon the woman's guiltiness or innocence. So even if this was talking about a miscarriage, the woman is not choosing a miscarriage. She is not getting an abortion. God is taking the life. And listen, while some people may not get this, God has the right to take life. He made you. He owns your life. The very breath that you breathe is a gift of God. And if God decides to take life, he has that right. This is not a woman choosing to take her own child's life. This is God saying, hey, there is a punishment for cheating and adultery. Now, I don't believe that in this case it is a pregnant woman who is losing her child if she's guilty. I believe this is an unpregnant woman, and if she is guilty, she will not be able to be pregnant. It's the curse of barrenness. And again, almost every Bible translation says barrenness, meaning her belly will swell and her thigh will rot. It's not saying that she's going to lose the child she has. It's saying she won't be able to have children. There's a difference in that. Do y'all see what I'm saying there? And the more accurate translation would be barrenness, not miscarriage, once again. So we come through these 3 verses, and we put them into context, and we understand what the verses are talking about. We've come to the point where all of these verses, she was so confident support abortion, it's very clear that they don't. Okay? But listen, that's not the end of the story, and that's not where we're done, because I have a whole lot more verses I want to share with you guys. The Bible is overwhelmingly pro-life, and I'm going to prove it to you. And we're going to read through these other verses. It's going to be like a speed round, all right? The first one is Exodus 20:13. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not kill, right? Thou shalt not murder. That's what it's talking about. Unjust killing, taking of life without a just cause. Taking life without, unless it's in self-defense, pretty much that's murder, all right? That's the most basic, that's one of the simplest 10 commandments. You are not allowed to take life unless there is a just reason to do so. And that means any human being. We see God apply this standard across the board. Only God and God alone can make a decision when it is appropriate to take life, and God has decided outside of cases of self-defense or his own judgment, life is not allowed to be taken, because life is ultimately made in whose image? God's image. All human beings are precious to him and valuable to him, and he alone reserves the right to determine when it can be taken and when it can't. Right? So we need to keep this in mind. So this is the foundational thing. This is why as Christians, we have a foundation for saying murder is wrong. Think about this for a second. If there was no God and your life was by an accident, all human beings accidentally came into existence by evolution, there is no God, there's no meaning to life, there's no purpose to life, why would it be wrong to kill people? Some people might say, well, because, you violate their rights. But who said they have rights? Do animals have rights? Do we get mad when a lion kills a sheep? Do we get mad when a monkey kills a smaller animal for fun? Y'all know monkeys do that? They're pretty wild. Okay, so if we don't get mad when animals kill each other for fun or for food, then why is it wrong if we were to do so? What makes us different than animals if there is no God? Right? What gives our life value? What gives our life purpose and meaning? What gives us any sort of rights if there is no God? Do y'all see the point here? This is why it's so important. So people who reject the idea of God altogether, I would challenge them, listen, you don't even have a good reason to say that murder is wrong outside of, ew, that sounds icky, I don't like it. Okay, but what if somebody thinks murder is good? What makes you right and not them? Okay, you say murder is wrong because it hurts people. Well, what's wrong with hurting people if their life has no value? What's wrong with the lion hurting a sheep? If it's all about survival of the fittest and just doing what makes you happy, there are people who get happy when they kill people. What makes it wrong? It's because all life is made in the image of God. All life has value. All life has meaning. And to take life away from someone without just cause is a great moral crime. Why? Because we are made in the image of God. And your life does have value and meaning. Okay, so that being said, Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5 says this. It says, before I formed thee in the belly. This is God speaking to the prophet Jeremiah. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest out of the womb, I sanctified you, meaning I chose you. And it says, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. God is telling the prophet Jeremiah, before you were even conceived, before you even came into existence inside the womb, I already had a plan for your life. And before you were born, I decided what you would become. Hello? Life doesn't begin before birth. I think God says differently. He has plans before the sperm and the egg even meet. God already loves you and has a plan for your life. How could that be if life did not begin in the womb? How could that be if all life did not matter to God? If you think God did not care about unborn children in the womb, then why would He say stuff like this? If that was the case, God wouldn't have any plans for your life until you were born. Oh, shoot, where'd you come from? Dang, I wasn't expecting you to come around. You were just a bunch of nothing to me until 5 seconds ago when you came out of the womb. That's not what God says. He says, before you were even in the belly, before you were even born, I made plans and I chose you to be a prophet. Psalm 139 verses 13 through 16 says this. It says, for thou hast possessed my reins, and thou hast covered me, meaning in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance, meaning my body, was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my body, my substance, yet being unperfect, meaning unformed, meaning not fully formed yet. And in thy book all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. This means from the very beginning stages, at the moment of conception, God is crafting and forming a baby, overseeing the process for a baby to come into existence, overseeing the unique DNA that human being will have, overseeing the unique plans that God has for that life in the womb. This is what God is saying. Guys, there is not a biblical justification to say that human beings in the womb are not lives. I have one more verse. Luke chapter 1, verses 39 through 41. And remember, this is in the Gospels. This is when Jesus himself is in the womb of his mother Mary. And there's a prophet named John the Baptist who's in the womb of his mother Elizabeth. He's Jesus' cousin. And it says, and Mary arose in those days and went into the hill country with haste into a city of Judah, and entered into the house of Zacharias and saluted, or means greeted, Elizabeth. And it came to pass that when Elizabeth heard the salutation of Mary, the babe leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Ghost. That baby in the womb of Elizabeth, John the Baptist, the guy who would go on to baptize Jesus himself. I'm pointing at my own stomach. I'm not pregnant. Point over there at Shay's stomach. In the womb. What? That baby in the womb, that fetus in the womb moved and stirred for joy at the idea of Jesus being there next to it. Tell me that God does not believe that life in the womb doesn't have value to him. Tell me that God is not overseeing the process of that child coming into the world. Tell me that God doesn't have plans for every life, the moment of conception and even before. So when we put the Bible into all this context, we look at the verses that clearly talk about how God has plans and oversees the forming of a baby in the womb, how God loves it, how God values it. And then we look at the verses that these pro-choice people try to use to say the Bible supports it. Guys, they don't make any sense. How can the same God who says all of these things give permission to kill a child for any reason? A challenge that I posted, and some of you guys have probably seen it on my TikTok, a challenge that I posted, and I said, if anybody considers themselves to be pro-choice and a Christian, I have a simple question I want you to answer. Did Mary, the mother of Jesus, have a right to abort Jesus? Jesus was born in the womb just like we were. The Son of God, perfect, innocent, and holy, who would go later to die on the cross for our sins. The question, I ask that because of this right here. If you believe that it is okay to kill babies in the womb, and you say, well, you know what, they're not real human lives yet, even though God says otherwise, but let's pretend you're going to ignore all these verses as a Christian. And you're going to say, no, I don't consider unborn children living beings. Okay, then why would it be wrong to kill Jesus in the womb? He's not alive yet. He's not fully formed yet, right? If life begins at first breath, then why would it be wrong to kill baby Jesus? But how many of you guys, just by thinking of that question, you feel uncomfortable with the idea of killing Jesus in the womb? Like, that sounds messed up. Regardless of what your opinions are. That something feels wrong with that. You should. Because, see, here's the deal. Deep down, we all know that abortion is wrong. And if it is wrong to kill Jesus in the womb, then that means it's wrong to kill anybody in the womb. So, well, it's different because he's like God or something. He's like God. But Jesus said, how you treat the least of these, referring to the people of the lowest class, referring to the poor, referring to the needy, referring to the orphans, referring to the unwanted children of the world. How you treat the least of these is how you treat me. So if you say it's okay to abort children in the womb, you've already said it's okay to kill Jesus in the womb. What's the difference? Jesus made that very clear himself. How you treat the least of these is how you treat me. If you're pro-choice here, you got to be pro-choice for Mary. And by the way, I will go ahead and leave on this context here. Mary was about 15 or 16 when she got pregnant. She did not get pregnant by another human. God supernaturally placed Jesus into her womb. In that day, a woman who was pregnant outside of wedlock was often put to death. That's how seriously that was taken. Today's world, very different, all right? But that's what it was in Mary's day. So she's a young, preteen, not preteen. She's a young teen, pregnant out of wedlock, probably could get killed for that, and she's also poor. Like the exact situation that pro-choice people in today's world say, well, what if a 15-year-old got pregnant? What if they were poor and couldn't take care of it? Wouldn't that make it okay for you? Ask Mary. Ask Mary what she wanted to do. Carrying the Son of God. Carrying a child that she did not know how she was going to take care of it. She didn't have all this money and resources. She ran the risk of being killed in her day for having this child. Yet what choice did she make? And look at the benefits that we get to receive because Mary stayed faithful to God and his purposes. Guys, every human life has value to God. Every single one. You had value to God when you were in your mother's womb, and you had value to God before the sperm and the egg even met. God had a plan for your life. And if we are going to sit here as now that we're all born, and we're going to dehumanize unborn children and say they're not worthy of the same protections as me. I'm more human than them. I'm more deserving than them. Guys, you were an unborn fetus too. Think about what you're condemning. If you say that abortion is acceptable, think about the unborn baby Jesus and how much that bothers you to even think, why does it bother me that it would be wrong to kill Jesus, but then I'm over here pro-choice? You should feel bothered by that because there is something wrong with it. Now, I say all this to say, I'm laying out the biblical case to say that, listen, here's my ultimate point. So passages used to support abortion are either taken out of context or mistranslated. We talked about that, right? We went through these passages. So God tells us numerous times that he values the life of the unborn. We just read those passages. And here's the last thing I want to leave off on. You cannot be pro-choice if you are following Christ. If you are a follower of Jesus and you say, Jesus is the king of my life, and what he says, I obey, that's called following Christ. If that is your position, you say, I'm a Christ follower, then you cannot go against him. You have to submit to him. You have to do what he says. You have to obey the things that he commands you to do. You have to believe the things that he wants you to believe. You have to value the human lives that he says to value. And he says to value all life. You know what else Jesus said about children? It's one of my favorite passages because it's both encouraging and scary at the same time. He says to a group of people, he says, if you cause any harm to children, it would be better for you to have a giant stone hung around your neck and you were thrown into the sea. That was a threat Jesus made. If you dare cause harm, spiritually or physically, to children, you're better off having a heavy stone hung around your neck and thrown into the sea than what I'm going to do. That's Jesus that said that. Remember the nice guy that we love to think it was always super sweet all the time? Even Jesus had a bone to pick with those who hurt innocent children.
Amen.
Guys, as Christians, we follow Christ. We don't follow the culture. We don't follow our own opinions. We don't follow our own beliefs. We don't follow our hearts. We follow Jesus, who's God, who's perfect, who's holy. And when he says that unborn children have value, when he says that anybody who hurts children is going to be in severe danger of punishment from God, we obey that. We respect that. We don't go against it. Now, I know, y'all, probably all of us in here, we know friends and family and people we go to school with that are hardcore pro-choice. Because they think of it as, well, you're against women's rights if you're not pro-choice. I wouldn't dare say that if you believe a murder is a crime, that you're against the human right to murder people. Why are you against my rights? You're saying I can't murder people? Wow, you're really against my right to what? So when people say you're against women's rights, a woman's right to what? Murder a child. Yeah, I am against that. Remember slavery? How back in the day, people would argue, the states that would allow slavery, they would say, hey, you know what? You're violating our states' rights. If the government says slavery is illegal, they're violating our states' rights. Yeah, your right to what? Own a slave? You think that's a right? Of course it's not a right. Guys, in the same way, there are people that demand a right to kill an unborn child in the womb. And as Christians, that is not a right that we have. We don't have the right to take life because we don't want it. We don't have a right to take life because we find it undesirable. And we don't have a right to take life because it might negatively affect our own lives. The Jesus that we follow, what did he do with his life for us? He gave up his life for us. Meaning, he took upon the consequences of sin so that we could be with him in heaven. The Jesus we follow says, hey, give up your life for other people. Sacrifice yourself for the benefit of others. And what does the pro-choice side say? I'm going to sacrifice my child for the benefit of me. Ooh. Guys, the Jesus we follow is compassionate. And listen, I will tell you this, as a Christian right now, I want you guys to understand me. For those of you who may not know my opinions, you don't know everything that I believe. I'm going to tell you right now, I absolutely believe in helping mothers who are expecting children and doing everything I can to help them. My family has been fostering for several years now. And let me tell you what, I view those foster kids, and I love them just as much as I do my brother Jake and my other siblings. And I would do it, if I had to give my life for them, I would in a heartbeat. And when me and Shay, we're still a newly married couple, don't even have our own kids yet, but I can tell you this, we already have plans to adopt as soon as we can afford it. Guys, as Christians, absolutely, we believe in protecting the unborn. But to go with that, we believe in helping those through trials. This church has helped so many pregnant mothers who don't know what to do. Even if they got pregnant out of wedlock, of course we believe that sex outside of marriage is a sin. But if a mother needs help in raising a child or taking care of it, guys, we've done that for years. This culture acts like, Christians and those pro-life people, they're only pro-birth. They don't actually want to help women. They don't actually want to help the child once it's born. Guys, that couldn't be a bigger lie. Do y'all know that the adoption rate for Christian people is 2.5 times higher than every other group of people in this country? Christians adopt at a rate of 5%. 5%. You think that sounds kind of low. Well, why don't you look at what everybody else is doing? 2%. We double the adoption rate of every other group in this country. Why don't you look at charitable giving? How much Christians give to charity and charitable causes? The average Christian gives almost $3,000 a year to charity. Think, well, that's not a lot. Okay, the average non-religious person gives only $700 to charity. Ooh. What about the foster care system? What about pregnancy centers? All of these things that take care of mothers and children during and after a pregnancy, almost all of those things are supported by pro-life people and Christians. Y'all heard of Planned Parenthood before, right? The organization that mainly what they do is provide abortions. They're super pro-choice. Did y'all know that the vast majority of their business is making money off of abortions? They talk like, oh, we offer help for mothers if they want to give birth too. No, they don't. That's why multiple Planned Parenthood centers are having to shut down in Texas because Texas has outlawed abortion. They can't survive without providing abortion. They don't care about helping mothers after pregnancy. They're not there to do that. They're there to provide abortion. That's it. So look at the pro-choice side. How many adoption agencies are they helping? How many kids are they adopting? How many foster kids are they helping to raise? How many pregnancy centers are they helping to fund? None. But what are the pro-life people doing? Oh, they're doing nearly all of that work. What are Christians doing? Oh, they're adopting more than everybody else in the country. Guys, this is the heart and spirit of what Jesus wants from us. So absolutely, I'm against abortion 100%, but I also believe in helping those who are in need. I believe in supporting mothers and their children after that pregnancy. So I will never turn a blind eye to the child once it's born. That's not what I believe, and that's not what any Christian I know believes. So don't let social media and these people that are bitter and angry towards Christians poison your mind towards Christianity and tell you they don't care about children. They're just saying they're not pro-life, they're just pro-birth. Guys, those are nasty lies. Talk to some Christians. Ask them what they actually talk with Christians and ask them what they want to do to help unexpecting mothers and their children. I promise you, you will not see one person that goes, oh yeah, well, I only care that they're born. I don't care what happens afterwards. The only people saying that are people who aren't Christians, who want to attack Christians and make them look ugly because they have a heart that is so messed up from their ugly view of humans that they want to make the church look bad. That being said, guys, I know tonight it's like, man, I really went in on this, but man, it's such an important subject. And I want you guys to stand strong and know, hey, listen, I can say with 100% confidence, this book right here loves unborn children. The God who wrote this book, who gave the inspiration for it, loves unborn children. And no passage in this Bible can be used to support abortion when you put it in its context and you understand the language it was written in. It's very clear that it does not support abortion in any sense. Okay, that being said,
Before you close,
yes.
I think it'd be good to show the live action Olivia video.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and say a word prayer. I can show that after.
Okay.
Anyway, maybe I'll think about it anyway. Y'all better heads close your eyes. I want to say a word of prayer really quick. Dear God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for everything that you've done. And God, I know that tonight's message was more of a harder subject because it's so controversial in today's world. And God, I know that so many people in here have already experienced the heat from disagreeing with those who are pro-choice. But God, I pray you could help all of us to understand in here, no matter how well each individual person in here knows the Bible or not, I pray that you could help us to be 100% convicted and sure that it is our duty as Christians and Christ followers to value the life of the unborn. And God, if we're going to actually mean what we say when we say that we're Christians, then we have to oppose abortion. That doesn't mean we have to turn a blind eye to mothers and unborn children. Of course we should help them. And of course we should support them. But God, we have to stand against abortion if we're going to be followers of Christ. And I pray that you could help every person in this room to be able to stand strong against that. To be able to be willing to put aside our own beliefs and attitudes to follow what you say. Because God, if we're not following you, then we're not Christians. If we're not doing what Jesus says, then we're not followers of Christ. It's that simple. So God, we have to do that, and we have to honor you, and we have to love the lives of all human beings, not just the ones that we want to, but even the ones that we don't want to, God, because that's what you did for us on the cross. In Jesus' name, amen.